G'day guys, welcome back to a new episode of the Boundary Riders podcast, episode 64 I believe. We do have a lot to talk about in this episode. We'll be taking a look at the injury updates coming over the weekend along with the suspensions, the debate between who is better, Harley Reid and Nick Daicos, and of course we'll be looking at our fan favourite segment, the Flog of the Week, which could be a contender for Flog of the Year. This one's a pretty big one and most of you would probably know them, and of course we'll cover our tips, AFL fantasy breakdown, but let's roll the intro and get straight into it. And then Rankin from the pocket, don't tell me, Isaac Rankin!
Yeah.
He's just got the license for a brothel.
Well, I think Gather Round's going to be more than just AFL this next season.
It's at the handle at the back, Nick Daicos to get the pies home! He's done it! So guys, again, my brother is absent. He just didn't want to come today. No, he just had work again, so unfortunately he won't be here for this episode. He has given me his tips and his AFL fantasy trades, which we'll cover at the end of the episode for the AFL segment anyway. But unfortunately he's not here, so I'll just have to pick up the slack once again. But I'm pretty used to that in our relationship, him being the younger brother. But anyway, let's move into it. So first thing we'll cover today is a couple of injuries from the weekend and a couple of suspensions. So the first one here is right back on Thursday. I'm recording this on Monday, but this will be released on Wednesday morning as it usually is, but it does seem that Mac Andrew from the Thursday night game may have a little fracture in his fibula, so that's a little bit concerning. Hopefully he's not out for too long because he's been very important for the Gold Coast Suns, so that's a little bit concerning for them. On the Isaac Rankin front, it is seen that he will miss the next 3 weeks due to a hamstring, so if you did see it late in the game, obviously he went on that big run that went too far. Eventually, it did come out that he did run too far. He did pull his hamstring. He's going to be out for 3 weeks. So that's massive for the Crows. 3 weeks out for him. He's been one of their better players this year. So that's really concerning for them. And on the Port Adelaide front, interesting one. This is Ollie Wines. If you didn't see it happen on Sunday, he came off at quarter time with heart palpitations and was out of the game at quarter time. He is expected to play this week for Port, so that is good news, but very concerning on that front because it was very concerning for a time. Having a player go out with any sort of heart issue is obviously very huge, so had to be the utmost caution there for Port Adelaide, but hopefully it's not a situation like Connor Rosie that he has a situation happen again to him next week, so hopefully everything's all good there for Ollie Wines, but it does seem he is all good after the game, so that is good to see. Now let's take a look at the suspensions. So there were a couple over the weekend. First one we'll take a look at is the Jimmy Webster one. Now he has not received a suspension, which I totally think is fair enough. If you didn't see it, in the middle of the ground between the Dockers and the Saints, Frederick was going back with the flight and Jimmy Webster was coming across and he went to spoil. 100% was watching the ball the whole time. Frederick was just in an awkward position and unfortunately he came off second best. In a contact sport, unfortunately some sort of injuries like that are going to happen. So Jimmy Webster did get off, which is good, and hopefully Michael Frederick, is all good. Now the next one is Eric Hipwood. He did get one game. Now I think this is a pretty tough one. If you didn't see it, he did a sling tackle on Nick Vlaston. I thought this was pretty tough. I thought that it was pretty hard on Eric Hipwood because the reason why they're trying to say that he didn't take the duty of care with Nick Vlaston is the fact that he grabbed both his arms and slung him to the ground, which I guess is fair. But the main reason why Hipwood in that situation grabbed both his arms is so Nick Vlaston couldn't get the ball away. So I wouldn't be too surprised if Brisbane actually appeal that. We'll have to wait and see on that front. I mean, you guys will know by the time this comes out. But yeah, I'm a bit surprised that got a week. Well, I'm not surprised that it got a week, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets off for that. Next one is Zach Butters. So he had a couple of instances against Hawthorn on the weekend, and he received 2 fines, one for $10,000 and another for $3,700. So big fine for Zach Butters. I'm sure he's owning over 800k, so that's just pennies for him. But a little bit, he got a bit lucky there. He's been cautioned by the match review panel for a couple of weeks now. So I don't know how well he'd be polling in the Brownlow so far. He's polling okay in the Boundary Riders. So, by the way, Boundary Riders, if you get suspended, doesn't matter. You can get suspended for 6 weeks. You can still win the medal, guys. Obviously. Well, I mean, it's true. But, yeah, in the Brownlow, of course, if you don't know, which I'd be very surprised, if you get suspended by the MRO, then you can't be eligible for the Brownlow. So, he's got off a couple of weeks now, and a little bit concerned there for Zach Butters. Hopefully he needs to maybe pull it in just a little bit, but he didn't get a week. Harry Jones also got a week for a sling tackle on Zach Fisher. That one, I think, is a little bit different. It was more of a slinging act. It was a second act, which is something that Eric Hipwoods didn't have, really. I thought it was one straight swing. This one was a little bit different. I do think Harry Jones will probably have that week kept on him. They may challenge it, but at this stage, I think that's pretty well fair enough. And just as we're getting this live right now, because I just saw it pop up on my screen, Sydney Swan, Luke Parker. Now, if you didn't see this happened in the... Oh, you've got to... Oh, no, it doesn't. This happened in the VFL. So obviously Luke Parker's been out of the team for quite a while now for Sydney, even though he's came back from his injury. And he's had to bide his time in the VFL. And on the weekend, they were playing against Frankston. And he made a late bump on the Frankston player named Josh Smith, which left him with significant facial fractures and a concussion. So it does say here that he is set to be facing the VFL tribunal this week, and this incident has been graded as careless conduct, severe impact, and high contact. So the Swans having the bye in both the AFL and the VFL next week. A 4-match ban will mean the earliest Parker could return would be in round 16 against Fremantle, which is the end of June. So that means that Luke Parker's going to miss 5 weeks of footy, a 4-week ban. I honestly think he probably should have got more. Or wouldn't have been surprised if it was more. And I wouldn't be surprised either if the AFL come back and maybe appeal that to make it a bit longer. Because, look, Sydney Swans fan, you guys all know that. I don't know why I keep on saying it, but I do. But Luke Parker, it was off the ball. I thought at first glance that he hit him in the chest. Sorry, just turn off the mic. He must have hit him somewhere towards the jaw area or something. Because he did have severe facial injuries, Josh Smith, for the Frankston team. So, I mean, something must have really severely happened if that's how serious the injury is. I'm very surprised it's not more than 4 weeks. It was off the ball. It was careless. I mean, he got given severe impact. That's pretty high. I think it's the highest you can get. So, the fact that he's only got 4, I am very surprised it's not more than that. So, a little bit lucky for Luke Parker, but I don't think it's... I know some people are trying to say, oh, it's out of frustration that he's hit someone. I just think it was a dumb decision, a brain fade. And it happens to AFL players all the time. I think it's sort of similar to Jimmy Webster. Like, we don't see it very often from players like that, like Luke Parker, like Andrew Gaff, like... I just mentioned him. Jimmy Webster. You know, they haven't been suspended very times in their career. It's not like a well-known suspended player, but just sometimes players just have a little bit of a brain fade and do something completely stupid. And there's no excuse for it, but it's just something that happens sometimes. Players just lose their thinking for one moment and then just make a dumb decision, and they deserve to be suspended. And that doesn't mean they should get off anyway. I think it's stupid when they have the good guy rule. That's so stupid. If you make a dumb act in a game, you deserve to get a suspension no matter what. You don't get off just because you've been a good guy in the past. I mean, obviously this is a dumb scenario, but I mean, if you think about it on the law-wise, if you murder someone, obviously if you've been a good guy your whole life, it doesn't matter. You still get taken to prison if you murder someone. Depending on if you've been an asshole your whole life or a good guy. It doesn't make a difference. But anyway, it does seem that Luke Parker's going to be getting 4 matches for that suspension, for that hit. I probably think it should have been a little bit more, but this is on Monday. I think maybe the AFL will appeal that, because I think that's probably a little bit less. I thought for sure it would have been 5 or 6, but we'll wait and see on that one. And Luke Parker, I mean, at this stage, I don't think he's getting into the Swans team anytime soon, so maybe there'll be a couple of injuries that pile up for Sydney, and maybe he'll be back in round 16 at the earliest. So, yeah, a little bit concerned there for Luke Parker. I just think at the end of the day, it was a bit of a brain fade. Let's move on, though. I want to talk about the Richmond Tigers. So, Richmond, of course, have been battered around the last couple of weeks on the field. We'll talk about the injuries, but Richmond at the moment are in all sorts. A massive loss against Brisbane this week was 119 points. And the week before that, they got smashed against the Bulldogs. They conceded 133 points and lost by 91. So combined the last 2 weeks, they've lost by 210 points, the Tigers. And right now, they are a shell of them for themselves. I mean, we've got to remember that in 2020, they won the premiership. In 2021, they missed finals, and in 2022, they got into the finals, and they nearly won their first elimination final. They only lost by a goal when they made a stupid mistake in the back goal square from a couple of defenders. 2 years ago, this team was on the brink of a semi-final, and now they're bottom of they're basically bottom of the ladder, minus the worst team we've seen in the last 20 years in North Melbourne. Maybe not that bad, but anyway, Richmond. It's interesting because we all thought that Richmond were going to be down the bottom at the start of this year. We thought that Adamuse would have a tough time, and right now they're going to be sitting at the bottom. They're kind of sitting where everyone was expecting, but. Well, maybe not what we were expecting, but, somewhere around that mark in the bottom four. But right now, they are definitely the second worst team in the comp. And I said it a couple of times. I said it in the review, and I said it as well on stream in the last game, that if Richmond played North Melbourne next week, I think it would be a very interesting game. I don't think they play until round 20, so hopefully by then Richmond have a few players back and they can go and win that game. But right now, if those two played each other next week, I think it would be a very interesting contest. I couldn't pick who would win it. And it's kind of a blight on North Melbourne, because if a depleted Richmond side, if you can't beat that, then you've got some problems for North. But at this stage, I wanted to take a look at the injury list. So the injury list, this is from last week, but I can add the other ones that I know anyway. So Liam Baker was a test for last week. He didn't play. Sam Banks got 1 week. Seth Campbell has 1 to 2 weeks. Judson Clark's out with an ACL for the rest of the season. Matt Kalina is out for a long term. Fawcett is out for long term. Josh Gibcus is obviously out for the season. Jack Graham out for a couple of weeks. Dylan Grimes is a test, so he'll probably be back this week. Jacob Hopper, 2 to 3 weeks. Tom Lynch, 4 to 6 weeks. Morris Rioli, 8 to 10 weeks. Jack Ross, 6 to 8 weeks. Tim Taranto, 3 to 4 weeks. And then James Treatise, I don't know what that name is 1 week. So off all of them right now, there isn't a lot of big names to come back in the next week. You got Liam Baker, yes. You've got Jack Graham, maybe. Dylan Grimes probably comes back this week as well. But at the moment, even if there are a lot of I would say rookie players that they would like to test that are injured at the moment. Like Judson Clark, for example, is out for the whole year. Seth Campbell's had a couple of games. He's been pretty decent. Sam Banks has shown some stuff. Obviously, Josh Gibcus is a massive loss for them. Jack Ross as well. Morris Rioli, who was starting to prove some stuff towards the start of the season, but he's obviously out. So those are the ones, those fringe players that could have been in the team. But they've obviously got some big outs who would be in their 22 mainstays, like Tim Taranto, Tom Lynch, Jacob Hopper, Dylan Grimes, obviously, and Liam Baker. So they were all out in that game against Brisbane. Now, the injuries that happened over the weekend for Richmond was Lafau, Mansell in the AFL, and then Sam Naismith in the VFL. They had 4 listed players in the VFL side going into the weekend, and Sam Naismith got injured. So they have not a lot to look for. You lose by 210 points, you would be expecting mass changes, or 220 points actually. But there's not much Richmond can do at the moment. There's nothing. There's nothing that they can reach for in the VFL. So I want to look at the next couple of games. So next week, they're going to be playing against Essendon. This week, they're playing against Essendon in Dreamtime. Oh God, Essendon could absolutely kill them. Now, Essendon don't tend to flog teams, and they haven't really done it this season, but that could be an almighty flogging. We'll have to wait and see on that game. Then they've got Geelong down in Geelong, so that's another flogging. Then they've got the Crows at Adelaide Oval on a Thursday night, by the way. How the fuck did they get that scheduled for them? And then they play the Hawks. So 3 weeks, they could be in all sorts. The Crows can pile on a big score. Geelong down in Geelong, that could be devastating. And then this week, they're playing against the Bombers, who are second on the ladder. So right now, Richmond, I don't see any light ahead. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's an embarrassment of Adamuse, because you can sit there and say that Richmond are playing poorly and they're not showing effort, or maybe not effort, but they're just not putting enough effort in. That's maybe what I would claim to say as. But what can he do? I mean, he's got nothing on his side. Look at West Coast last year, how many injuries they had, and look where they finished on the ladder. They finished rock bottom of the ladder, and people were calling for Adam Simpson's job, which, is pretty fair enough, because of how many weeks they were getting flogged by. But this year, look at all the players that have returned. I'm not talking about Harley Reid. I'm talking about Waterman, Waterman, McGovern, Yo, just those 3, Barras as well. Just those 4 players in particular, they are back. And West Coast, look, they're not going to make finals this year, but they're a team that you can watch. And I think that's really unfair on Adam Uze to just put it all on him and say, oh, he's not right for the job, or, oh, they're in all sorts and he doesn't have a game plan. It's like, in pre-season, do you really think that Adam Uze would have been trying to... He has 4 players to pick... Sorry, because of no Naismith. 3 players to pick from the reserves this week after getting thumped by 119 points. I'm sure that wasn't in his thought process going into the start of the season. So... I understand that it's really tough on Richmond right now, and it's very easy to just point fingers at Adam Uze and say, oh, it's his fault, it's his problem. But what is he supposed to do? He's got nothing to go for. He's got nothing to help him. And I think it's just fucking... It's typical fucking AFL journalism, obviously. But let's give the guy a bit of a break. I mean, if he's got nothing to pick from... Well, I don't know what they're going to do this week against Essendon. I don't know what they're going to do. I do think that they need to give more effort on the defensive side, though. They are showing... I mean, no matter if you're Dustin Martin or Ryan Mansell, you've got to show you got to show pressure in a game, and I think that shows with the likes of Sydney this year, Collingwood, all the good teams up the top, Essendon, and that. You know, they're showing effort. Now, of course, they have a better quality list and a better quality 22 every week, but you can always put in a tackle. You don't need talent. You don't need to be a number 1 draft pick to lay a tackle. So that's something that Richmond do need to improve upon, and I'm not trying to just give Richmond a bunch of excuses and outs, but I am saying that Richmond don't deserve the amount of fucking backlash that they have received, because they are in all sorts, and if they were to lose the likes of... they are pretty lucky they haven't lost like Nankervis or Dustin Martin or Shea Bolton either, because if they did... they'd be even worse off. And even Noah Bolter, which, by the way, I think he probably should be playing in the back line, but I do understand that he's forward because they do kind of need an option up there. And, I mean, the likes of Jacob Kaczynski, I don't know why they brought him in at all, because he's playing in the VFL right now and he can't get into this team. That's pretty poor. Who knows if he's going to be on the list at the end of the year. That's probably a too big a call. But that's just where they're at the moment, Richmond, and... I think they need to bring the tackle pressure back. They need to do that. They need to find their DNA that they have had. But you can't put it all on Adam Uze because there's not much he can do at the moment. If his hands are tied behind his back, there's nothing he can do at the moment. There's nothing he can grab from. You can make all the big plans in the world, all the different like tactics and strategies and that. End of the day, if you don't have much personnel there, it's hard to get these sort of things in motion. So that's just my thoughts on Richmond right now. I think they'll bounce back eventually, but right now I think there's not much light ahead for them, which is really concerning. And, you know, like I said, this team was nearly in a semi-final 2 years ago, and now they are nearly rock bottom of the ladder. Let's move on. So, obviously, with the massive game from Harley Reid on the weekend, obviously the comparisons are back between him and Nick Daicos. Who's better? Who's going to be the better player? Who's going to fuck your mother? I don't know. But Look, I don't mind the comparisons, because obviously I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, stop making comparisons because it sucked. I'm going to start crying a river because people are making opinions. Like, who gives a fuck? But at the end of the day, I don't think you can compare these two because they're both very different players. Harley Reid's much more of an impact player, while Nick Daicos is a lot more of a involvement player, because... maybe in a couple of years, Harley Reid will bring that more involvement into his game. I think that's fair enough. He's only 9 games in, and his fitness probably isn't at the standard to fully be in that midfield for West Coast just yet. We have seen that he plays, you know, in spurts in the midfield, and my God, does he have impact when he's in there. That was probably... I've seen a couple of games from him. I saw him in Gather Round. That was the first game that I saw him play, and he was fucking good against Sydney. That was probably the first game he's actually played like really, really good football. And then since then, he's really like had a good start to his. That's really where he spurred his career on so far, and you know, his very short career. Now Nick Daicos, I've seen quite a few times. You see Collingwood pretty much every single week, so you kind of know how he's going. Now, again, they're very different players, so I don't like to say one's better than the other. I mean, I've written down here that it's like you comparing Brad Hill and Dustin Martin together. Like, they are both, even though, yes, they're both midfielders, but at the end of the day, they're not the same sort of player. If it was Harley Reid up against someone that was more of a big body midfielder who plays forward quite a lot, maybe you could make that comparison. Or Nick Daicos going up against like the Tom Mitchell of the time. That's where you can make the comparisons. But I don't think you can compare these two. If I had to say it, I would say who's better on impact players? I would say Harley Reid. If you're talking more about being involved in games and, helping your team out more, I would say, I think Nick Daicos is probably the better player. On the other hand, Harley Reid is playing in a lesser team. Nick Daicos has played in a team that's made the top 4 every single year since he's been in his career so far. So those are the sort of things you can compare. But at the end of the day, I think it's really hard to compare these two together because they're both very different players. What I saw from Harley Reid, though, in that game against Melbourne yesterday, you probably, if you didn't see the stream, you probably may have seen it. There's a couple of YouTube shorts up that you probably may have seen. But he is an exciting player to watch. And I know I bagged it on, I made a TikTok about it, about like West Coast are not relevant. And I'll admit it, I'm wrong. That he's made them a relevant club, Harley Reid, now. Because they are a good team to watch, West Coast, when they're at home, by the way. When they're away, they look like shit. But that's okay, because I'm not expecting them to make finals this year, West Coast. But he has given them something. He's given them a new lease on life. However, I don't think he would have helped North Melbourne that much at all. Because the way that North Melbourne are, how poor they're playing. West Coast were lucky that when he went to West Coast, and then not only him, but they've got all these players back through injury. So it's not just Harley Reid. He's got so many other players around him that are helping him improve, just steadfast, really quickly. Looking at, North Melbourne, I don't think he would have this sort of impact in his first year, in my opinion, anyway. I don't know, but that's just what I think. On the comparison to Nick Daicos, though, I don't think there is a comparison to make because I think they're both incredibly different players. I think on a team aspect, I think that Nick Daicos is a better player. I think he helps out in the clearances. He gets it out to his teammates. And when he's around the stoppages, he's very hard to stop because he's so quick with his quick little movements. He's so nimble. However, Harley Reid or whatever, he's so much more of a battering ram. I think he's a lot better as a player like that. He can sprint he's got very good bursting speed that I've seen, and he could definitely play up forward. I think he could definitely take a more Isaac Heaney role on the Sydney side. I think he could definitely do that, especially earlier on in his career, and then maybe go back into the midfield. But I think in the next year or two as well, he could definitely play 60-40 forward line, and he will be very hard to stop. Almost like Jason Horne-Francis. That's probably a better example. I think that's a better comparison, by the way, Harley Reid to Jason Horne-Francis. I think they're a lot more similar players. I don't think Nick Daicos and Harley Reid are, by the way. And if I had to compare those two, I think I'd probably say Harley Reid would be in front at this stage. But again, we look at Jason Horne-Francis. Like I said, I don't think Harley Reid would have the impact if he was playing at North. Look at Jason Horne-Francis' first year at North Melbourne. There wasn't that many question marks about him being picked up and picked number 1, but there wasn't the impact that he was having at Port Adelaide in his first year or even this year. I mean, look at the game against Hawthorn. He was one of the few players that was decent in the first 3 quarters before Port Adelaide were able to steal that win. So that's kind of where I see it on the Harley Reid Daicos debate. I don't think there is a comparison to make, really. I'm not trying to fence it. I'm just saying that I think they're two incredibly different players. You can't compare them. But I do think that on one side, I think if you're looking on impact, I think that Harley Reid can have more impact in a game because I think he's just so... I don't know what the word would be, diverse. He can play forward. He can take marks. We saw a goal. If you compare his 2 goals that he got against Melbourne, one was bursting through the front of the stoppage in the centre clearance, and another one was up forward in a 1-on-1. So, if he can do that, I think it's, West Coast, if they need him up forward, he can go up forward. So he's a lot more useful in different positions. However, Nick Daicos, if you need someone to get you a couple of clean clearances, he's probably one to do it from Collingwood and get you a couple of handballs out into space. That's kind of where I'm looking at it on that side. So I think they're both incredibly good players, and I don't think that they should be saying, oh, Daicos is shit because he doesn't lay a tackle, or Harley Reid's shit because he didn't try, he kicked, I don't know. Has anyone called Harley Reid shit yet? Maybe not. Maybe we'll have to give it a couple. I think that's kind of similar as well. Nick Daicos is kind of old news. He's kind of who cares? He's played 50 games. No one gives a fuck about Nick Daicos anymore. Harley Reid's the new toy that everyone can sit around and say, oh my god, he's so cool. Look at all the cool little features he has, But at the end of the day, I think both of them are incredible players, and I can't wait to watch footy for the next 15 years and watch those 2 players develop and, become great players. And for people who keep on sitting there and saying, oh, he's going back to Victoria in a couple of years, did you ever see Jason Horne-Francis grab his North Melbourne jumper when he kicked the goal? I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, Harley Reid. So I think West Coast have a player brewing, and I think it's great to see that he went to West Coast. And Sam McClure, absolutely fuck you, bro. He sits there, I don't hate Harley Reid, I don't hate Harley Reid. Shut up, bro. Everyone hates you, Sam McClure. Anyway, let's move on. So speaking of absolute dogshit journalism, we get to our fan favourite segment, the Flog of the Week. Dun, 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 dun. I haven't got my brother here to make stupid noises. That would have been a good thing. But anyway, this week we do have a journalist, and oh boy, this is going to be hard to beat. I don't know if this person was trying to win this award, but Caroline Wilson is our nominee for this week. Now, if you haven't seen it, Caroline Wilson has made some interesting comments about Cam McCarthy. Now, I'm sure everyone knows what's happened with Cam McCarthy. He obviously passed away a couple of weeks ago, and it was tragic news to hear. Fremantle did a bunch of pre-game stuff, and players were in tears. GWS obviously had a pre-game stuff as well, and it was tragic news when we heard the story about Cam McCarthy. It was tragic. But for some reason, Caroline Wilson had to make a story out of this. So I'm going to play the audio of this. I do appreciate it's Freo Hub and the Big Deegs podcast for bringing this to light, because I don't think no one has reported on this, which is fucking atrocious, by the way. The fact that these two guys on Instagram have had to showcase how much of a fucking horrible woman this is an absolute joke. I know how the different channels like to fight against each other, but could you at least report something like this, for fuck's sake? I mean, Clayton Oliver has a bloody latte or whatever. Is he going to Geelong because he changed his coffee order from a latte to a cappuccino? That starts with the letter C, so that means he's going to the Cats. It's like, fuck off, bro. How about you report on a fucking journalist who's just saying some absolutely fucked comments on the bloody... I don't even know what this is on. I don't know where it's from, but... the Big D's podcast and Freo Hub are the ones who have brought this to light. So I'll play the clip now.
AFL sports journalist had this to say about Cameron McCarthy on a podcast called Real Footy.
You have to say that you have to have a look at the lifestyle in Perth, maybe compared to other places. I really mean that. I mean, I don't think Cam McCarthy's problem started at GWS. I'm not saying he wasn't in trouble when he left GWS, but I think it started in Perth.
Caroline Wilson.
Okay. Where is your evidence for that? To just throw accusations at Perth football or Perth media, or I don't know who she's throwing this at. If it's Fremantle, fuck off. If it's Perth media, I don't think that's the case. I don't know where she's throwing these accusations at, but to suggest that Perth, the Giants, the way that she suggests that the Fremantle or Perth in general has anything to do with this tragic situation, and not just maybe leave it. There's no story in this. It's just a tragic story about Cam McCarthy, who passed away at a very young age. A young man who has ended his life. And that's all this story is. The fact that Caroline Wilson is trying to... I don't know what she's doing. If her brain has exited through her earlobe, I don't know. But the fact that she is trying to bring up a reason for why Cam McCarthy has passed away, it's just... how brain rotted is your brain to try and get a story now? The standard of AFL journalism is in the fucking toilet, and Caroline Wilson is sitting there trying to trying to find a reason for it, and trying to put blame on someone for this, when it's just a tragic situation, when she has no knowledge, no evidence of anyone involved in this, trying to throw blame at someone for Cam McCarthy's passing. You have got to be the most brain-watered journalist if you're going to try and find a story out of this. You absolute worm of a journalist. Man, woman, child, that is a fucking atrocious thing to say, and trying to make an accusation of someone in Perth has... that this didn't happen in Sydney, that it wouldn't have this wouldn't have happened if he didn't move to Perth. What do you mean? Where's your evidence for that? Did he come out and tell you that he's struggled a lot since he moved to Perth? Is that the reason? Or is there something behind the scenes in his family that maybe happened? Or, I'm not going to make an accusation about that, because I'm not a fucking absolute... Do you have a soul, for fuck's sake? That is the most dog shit thing to say, and the fact that no one has shown this is an absolute joke. So I appreciate Freo Hub and the Big Deegs podcast for bringing this up, because I would have never known about this if it wasn't for that. And not that my thoughts about Caroline Wilson were nice before this, but now, absolutely fuck her. And she is like this. I know this is like a little joke segment calling the Flog of the Week or the Flog of the Year, but it's just a fucking dirty thing to do, to even try and come up with a fucking story on a tragedy like this. Like a clickbait fucking, oh, what did Fremantle do to get involved in Ken McCarthy's life? Like, you can make all your shit trade rumours and all this bullshit all your life, but when you're talking about this sort of stuff, could you just leave it alone? Would that be okay? You don't get paid anything extra to try and spin a story out of this, Caroline. You absolute worm of a journalist. So, sorry, I'm going to try and end it there, because I could just rant on about this and just ramble for the next hour. But fuck her, and that's the nominee for this week. I may even take a breath for a minute, because I know a lot of people who have suffered with mental health in my life, and to just try and come with a story about this, it's just fucking atrocious. So, absolutely fuck Caroline Wilson for that. I do agree that I do appreciate them for bringing it up, though. So I do appreciate that the Freo Hub and the Big Deegs podcast actually brought that up. So I do appreciate it, because that's just fucking atrocious from Caroline Wilson whatsoever. But let's move on to something a little bit more nicer, shall we? Let's move into our AFL tips for round 11. So we have a pretty big round this week. The first game of round 11. I have gone Sydney over the Bulldogs. Next up, I've gone Collingwood over Fremantle on Friday night. After that, Saturday afternoon, I've gone Port Adelaide over North Melbourne. Saturday afternoon as well, I've gone Carlton over the Gold Coast Suns. Saturday evening, I've gone Geelong over the Giants. Saturday night on Dreamtime, I have gone Essendon over Richmond. Sunday early game, I've gone Brisbane over Hawthorn. Sunday mid-game, I've gone Melbourne over St Kilda. In the last game, Sunday night or Sunday evening, I've gone Adelaide over the West Coast Eagles. Now, like I said at the start of the podcast, my brother also gave me his tips. He has gone Sydney over the Bulldogs. He's gone Fremantle over Collingwood. Port Adelaide over North Melbourne. Carlton over the Gold Coast Suns. Geelong over the Giants. Essendon over Richmond. Brisbane over Hawthorn. Melbourne over St Kilda, and then the Crows over the West Coast Eagles. So let's go right back to the start of the round. Sydney versus the Bulldogs. So this is an interesting game for the Bulldogs, because they've came off two pretty big wins. One was a massive flogging against Richmond. We've already talked about them, how many injury woes they've had. But the Bulldogs did what they had to do. They had to win a game. They saw an easy kill and they've got it. But the Bulldogs did what they had to do. They found an easy kill and they got it. Then they had a really tough slog against the Giants, and they were pretty well dominant against the Giants. I mean, they kicked 8 goals, 22. They could have won that game by 10 goals. They won it by about 30 points. So, a good win from the Bulldogs. But now they come up against the toughest test. And we've seen the Bulldogs be a response team. We've seen that many, many times. They're not a response team in this game, though. If they were coming off a big loss, I would give the Bulldogs a real chance here. But I think Sydney are in too good a form right now. At Marvel, I think Sydney's speed and ball movement will be too good for the Bulldogs. And I think the Bulldogs, I still don't trust their defence too much. Obviously, last week they were able to keep the Giants to 43, but that was in a slog game. This is going to be under the roof at Marvel Stadium. I don't think they'll be able to shut down Sydney as well. So I think that Sydney, they're in too good a form right now. So I think that they're going to be able to win this game by about 20-odd points. That's kind of what I put on the tips thing anyway. But I do think this is going to be a very good game. Even if the Bulldogs don't win this game, we will get to see where they're at, though, from this game. If they can perform pretty well for the majority of the contest, and if they can steal this win, that will prove to me that they're a team to watch this year. If they lose this one close game, I still think they're a watch. If they get flogged here, then they're not a watch for me. They've been a bit of a pretender the last few weeks. After that, we're going to go to the one tip me and my brother tip differently. He's gone Fremantle and I have gone Collingwood. The reason why I've gone Collingwood here is because I just think they've hit that rich vein of form where they missed at the start of the season. I think they've really hit that vein of form where it doesn't really matter about the personnel. Just everyone who comes into that team is going to make an impact and going to give something. They did lose Will Hoskin-Elliott, which is going to be a pretty significant loss for them because he's been pretty decent up forward this year, Collingwood. I think he'll be out this week. This is going to be an interesting game because this is at Optus Stadium. Collingwood don't leave Melbourne very often. On my brother's side, the reason why he has picked Fremantle is because they have not lost a game at home all season so far, and he has said that the injuries of Collingwood is why he has gone for Freo in this game. I think that Collingwood, if they can win through the middle of the ground, I feel like Collingwood can score more in this game if they get the ball forward enough. We've seen Fremantle the last couple of weeks butcher the footy in front of goal. If they do that against Collingwood, they are going to get beaten no matter what happens in this game. But I think they can give them a real shake here, Freo. And if they're going to be competing into the 8 this year, this is a big game. And, they probably should be favourites. This is at home. They haven't lost a game at home this year. They're coming up against a team who's, in a similar spot around the ladder. They're just outside the 8. Collingwood are in the 8, but that's the first time they've been in there this year from that win against the Crows. So I think it's a big contest. I think it's going to be one in the middle. I'll be interested to see if Fremantle decide to tag Nick Daicos or if they go to Jordan De Goey. I think that one thing that Freo do have is that they match up on the likes of De Goey pretty nicely. I think Liam Ryan just slots straight onto him. Because Collingwood don't really have that key forward to go to other than maybe Mason Cox. I think Alex Pearce will have a pretty good game on the intercept front. But if Mason Cox can do what he's done for a lot of this year, just bring the ball to ground, that's where I think Collingwood can win this one. And that's why I've kind of gone Collingwood here. I think they're just going to be a little bit too dangerous up forward. And Fremantle right now, I still struggle to believe in their forward line just yet. But I think this is going to be a really good game on Friday night. I'm really glad that this game's like a prime time game. After that, let's get to the Geelong versus GWS game. Down in GMHBA, you would just expect that Geelong would be the favourites here. And, to an extent, they are. But they're coming off 3 losses in a row. A tough game up in Darwin. And the Giants have a really good record down in Geelong. Now, me and my brother have both picked Geelong here. The reason why he's picked Geelong is because Cameron, Hawkins, and Duncan should be back. And even though the Giants have a good record down there, he thinks that those 4 players being rested for Geelong, they will be fine to come back and play a significant role. And he doubts they'll lose 4 in a row, which is kind of where I'm leaning as well. The fact that they rested a lot of players last week against the Gold Coast, I said it in the review, I don't think they were really expected to win the games. They didn't bring out their best team. They were kind of like, okay, put in our best effort, but if we lose, we're not just going to spit chips. We're going to be fine. So I think it's kind of where they were going at, and they were kind of just getting ready for this one. On the Giants, on the other hand, they have got a couple of players back, but their defensive game at the moment is quite poor. They got beat by the Bulldogs when they shouldn't have. They should be beating the Bulldogs. Like, if 2 weeks ago, if the Giants were playing the Bulldogs, they would be outright favourites. The last couple of weeks, the Giants have been well beaten on the defensive side, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of like an old pimple sitting there for the Giants, if you can say that. The fact that, they have always been questioned on their defensive attributes. They've always been praised for how well they can move the ball forward. But when they have to play defensively, they've been struggling. And I think that's something that Adam Kingsley brought into the team last year. But for some reason in the last couple of weeks, their want to defend has dropped off. And I think that's something that needs to be worked on by Adam Kingsley. I think this is, even though they had a tough start at the start of his tenure at the Giants last year, I think this is probably the toughest part of his career so far as the Giants coach, because they weren't really expected to do much last year, and then everyone praised him when they started hitting form. At the moment, they were one of the premiership favourites going into the year, and after the great start that they had, they've kind of fallen off a little bit. So I think this is a real challenge for Adam Kingsley. I think they can very well win this game, and I think that the players coming back for the Cats, I think the Giants' defence can stop them. But if their midfield aren't prepared to defend the Giants, the Cats will kill them here. I think this will be an interesting game. I think if the Giants don't defend, the Geelong will win this one comfortably. If the Giants can defend this game well through the middle of the ground, I think it's going to be a real contest. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, but I am going to tip the Cats in this game. So the last game I want to talk about is the Hawthorn versus Brisbane game, because Hawthorn are coming off some decent form the last couple of weeks. Obviously, they had the heartbreaker against Port Adelaide, but for 3 quarters, they had that game won against a much better side. Take the last quarter out of that, Hawthorn are in some decent form. But this is at Marvel. If this was at the MCG, I'd give Hawthorn a real shake here. But because it's at Marvel, Brisbane, they basically didn't even play a game last week against Richmond. They just had a training drill. So basically they've had the week off. You can look at this two ways. You could say they've had a rest, or you could say they're not going to be match fit enough after having the week against Richmond. And some teams can have that sort of thought. When you have a smashing 100-point win, you don't come back the next week as prepared for the next game. So I think this is an actual danger game for Brisbane here. Now, Brisbane need to win this game if they want to keep their finals hopes alive, because we're getting towards that mid-season now, and as we get towards the mid-season, if you don't win enough games by then, it's really hard for you to break into the 8. We did see Sydney and Carlton do it last year, but you don't really want to save your run to the finals that late in the season. So, I have tipped Brisbane, so has my brother, but I think this is a real danger game for Brisbane here, because if Hawthorn can win this one, if they can just even up in the midfield, I think their forward line can kick a score. And we saw last week that they brought the pressure in the first 3 quarters, Hawthorn. If they can do that for 4 quarters for Brisbane, if they can just stay even with them, but bring that pressure game, Brisbane have been shown that if they get pressured up pretty decently throughout the season so far, they just capitulate. I think Hawthorn can win this game, but I am going to go Brisbane because I just think they're starting to hit a little bit of form now, the Lions. And I think they've got the quality there that can just win this game. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about there for the Lions. But guys, of course, with the tips being done now, let's look at the tipping comp. Because this week we had a couple of people break away. We had a pretty big week. Most people got 7s and 6s. A couple of people got 5. That wasn't me. Looking at it right now, Brandon S is still on top of the tipping comp, so congratulations, man. He's been in the streams a couple of times, so I do appreciate his support. And right now, he is on top of the AFL tipping ladder on 63, and has a 2-point lead on Paul, who is in second spot, who I think just got up there this week. Yeah, he did, because Christie fell down. So Paul moved up into second spot on 61. Right there in third is me. I am on 60. I got 6 tips this week. I could have moved into equal second, but I messed up 1 tip. I think that was the Geelong. Yeah, that was the Geelong game. I picked Geelong over the Gold Coast, which was dumb of me. The big drop this week, though, was from Kirsty. She was in second last week. She's moved all the way down to 5th. She is on 60 tips, so she is equal with me, but she has that percentage a little bit lower. So a little bit disappointing there, but she'll bounce back. She's done pretty well this season. My brother, on the other hand, is down in 9th spot. I think he did increase this week. He went up a little bit. He's on 57 tips now. He did tip the Gold Coast, and he got 7 tips, so he's up into 9th. And then right down the bottom is still Daniel C, I believe. I don't think he's moved up. He did get 1 extra tip this week. He got 6, so he's on 55. But you know, it's a pretty tight comp at the moment. There's only 8 tips between top and bottom. There's only 13 of us. So our channel was quite small when this league was made. But next year, guys, we'll make a big league for everyone to be involved in our thousands of subscribers. We're going to be the biggest channel, so don't worry. We're going to have a huge league for you guys to join into. But right now, Brandon S still leads the AFL tipping comp for the Boundary Riders. But let's move on. We'll talk about our AFL fantasy for this week. So I won, but I was playing against the bottom team. So it's not much. It's like me beating North Melbourne. Sorry to Malcolm, who is the bottom team, but I actually don't think he's competing in the AFL fantasy anymore. I think he's the only one. Like, if you join like a random AFL fantasy league, you probably have like 3 or 4 teams that aren't competing. They don't do their trades after 3 weeks. They probably forget their password. I think he's the only one in this league that's not doing the trades and not being really involved. So for me, that was good because I had a couple of poor performances this week. Looking at it, I had to play Charlie Comben, who did really well. He scored 75. Maybe I didn't have a bad week. Oh, my midfield did bad. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, so Sam Walsh got 68. He got tagged by James Jordan. That was a little bit disappointing. Tom Green only got 83, which was pretty disappointing as well. Nick Martin, I had him as captain. He got 95 against North Melbourne. I thought he was going to do a lot better than that. He didn't. Bontempelli got 71. Absolutely terrible performance from him, even though they won. I don't care about you, Marcus. I want you to score fantasy points. I'm kidding. Well, I do, but I'm not going to be some idiot who's going to send you a dumb message on Facebook or Instagram. Oh, Facebook. What am I, 4? What am I, 400? Anyway. And Max Gawn as well only got 86. So that was a little bit disappointing. But on the other side of it, there was a lot. My defense, I really liked their performance this week. Sheasel 119, Young 108, Daicos 115. Comben, who I had to play this week because I kept Yo, he's on 75. And then Riley Bonner 109. He's had a brilliant year, Riley Bonner, on the fantasy front. And I did like my midfielders, Miller and Davies Uniacke. Davies Uniacke top scored in my midfield with 113. So I've been trying to get rid of him for the last few weeks, but I've just had to hold him through injuries and other stuff. So at the moment, I think I'll be able to hold him to North Melbourne's bye, which will be next week, which we'll talk about in a second. But he played pretty well. And Clayton Oliver I had to bring in this week. He scored 94. Now, not the greatest. We know he can score 150s when he's on his form, but he's only priced at 741 at the moment. So that's pretty decent for a guy who's only 700k basically. Now in my forward line, Isaac Heaney, thank God I brought him in. He scored 125. He was brilliant. Sam Flanders, he's had an awesome season, 122. Tom Powell's happy with, he got 85. Dempsey and Reid, both of them they got in their 80s. And Darcy Wilson got 72, and that's probably his lowest score in the last month. So really happy with their performances in the end. Now, to my trades, I have made 2 trades, and I am expecting at least, I may even change both of these, but at this stage, these are my trades. I've got rid of Charlie Comben for Zach Reid from the Bombers. I think he'll come back this week, but that will change if another defender comes in. And I've got rid of Ollie Dempsey, and I've got Brian Myers. I was going to go... that could definitely change. I was going to get Zach Fisher, but the reason why I'm not going to get him is because North Melbourne have the first bye. So I'm going to plan on getting him after North Melbourne's bye. That's what I'm thinking of there. And I didn't have enough money for Dane Zorko, so that was a little bit disappointing. But that's really the only forward I could have picked from to really go there. The next highest priced... the highest priced forward that I could get right now that's not Dane Zorko is Jake Waterman. Now, I did look at Jake Waterman's run the next 3 weeks. They've got the Crows, and then they've got a couple of decent... I think they've got the Saints, and I think after that they may have the Tigers. So I contemplated maybe picking him. Oh, no, they have North Melbourne. Oh, that's a decent thought. So the next 3 weeks, West Coast, are Adelaide, St Kilda, and North Melbourne. Now, no one's talking about Jake Waterman, which is not good enough in my opinion, but this guy has been in some hot form. Obviously, he's kicked a goal every single game he's played this year, but since round 5 against the Tigers, he got 6 goals against the Tigers, 5 against Freo, 4 against the Gold Coast, 3 against Essendon, and then last weekend, he scored 5 goals against Melbourne. So that was a thought that I would keep him until the bye. I may think about it because he's actually like not even just getting goals, but he's getting a lot of touches too. So Waterman was a thought. I don't know if I'm ballsy enough to do that. So I may think about that, may not. But right now, that's kind of what I'm looking at. And then yeah. So this is kind of the first time I've really looked at the buys coming up. So in round 12, which is next round, we have the Lions, North, Sydney, and the Giants who will have the buy. Now, luckily for me, I have a lot of players from those teams. No, not half, but it would be around that area. So right now, that's why I'm starting to get rid of North Melbourne. That's why I had to start getting rid of Charlie Comben. I could have kept him for another week, but the thing is, he's basically priced out now, and the fact that North Melbourne have the bye, I have so many North players. I have Powell, McKercher, Davies Uniacke, and Sheasel. That's 4, and then I've got a couple of Sydney players, Giants players, and I think I've got 1 Lions player as well. So, that's where I've kind of looked at for getting rid of that. But those are some thoughts, guys. If you need to think about your AFL fantasy stuff, just make sure you're looking at the trades this week and thinking about the buys. For some reason, they've set it up 4 buys for the teams in round 12, then 2 in round 13, and then 6 and 6. So I don't really know what they're looking at there, but I think it may have something to do with the fact that it's like Queen's birthday. They've given just 2 teams off on that weekend, but yeah, that's... who the fuck knows when they do this with the AFL anyway. But guys, that's basically all the breakdown for the AFL fantasy, and that's really all the AFL stuff we have for this week. So finally, let's move into World Sport. Now, of course, every single week we kind of cover some World Sport. Most of this season, it's basically been, since the AFL season started, it's just been the Premier League. But at the end of the day, the Premier League is all over. Today, which is Monday, you guys will obviously see by now, but the Premier League has been done, and Manchester City have claimed their 4th championship in a row. How fucking boring. But at the end of the day, they were the better team, and they won. Let's see how many... I think maybe all 4 championships get stripped from them after the 115 charges come down, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't even think that was the big story. I mean, I think everyone knew that City were going to win that game, and Arsenal were going to struggle. They did win their game, I believe, Arsenal, so they could have got it in the end, but that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess. The one game that they dropped, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, was the game that they had to hold, and they didn't. So that's kind of where the season was lost for them, unfortunately. City won 3-1 against West Ham, which was the sealer. West Ham, Kudus got a really big goal for West Ham, which gave them a little bit of a chance, but that's where it was won in the end. But looking at it, though, from that last day, that was basically the only big thing that was looked at. Of course, Jurgen Klopp, that was his last game for Liverpool, and a great send-off for him. They were able to get a win for Jurgen Klopp, which was brilliant for Liverpool. But it does set up the table finalised, so that means we can actually see who gets the European spots for next season. So, Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Aston Villa, all four of them will be moving into the Champions League. Tottenham, they will be playing in the Europa League. And Chelsea, after their massive form at the end of the season, with 5 wins in a row, have got themselves into a Conference League spot. So I'm pretty happy with that. We got into Conference League. Chelsea, look, it's easy to shit on Chelsea, but the fact that they have came out of nowhere. They were in the bottom 10 for a lot of this season, and the fact that they've somehow climbed into a European spot is unbelievable. Now, probably almost single-handedly by Cole Palmer, but great job from Chelsea in the end to claim that spot. Newcastle missed out on their spot. They finished in 7th. Manchester United finished in 8th. West Ham in 9th. Crystal Palace, they had a pretty good run in the end. I think they were down near the relegation battle for a bit, but they finished in 10th in the end. Brighton had a pretty poor second half of the season. They finished in 11th. Bournemouth, they had a pretty decent season. They finished in 12th. Solanke carried a lot of that season for them, though. Fulham finished in 13th. Wolves finished in 14th. And then Everton, surprisingly, they finished in 15th. Now, if you give back their 8 points, they would have finished in 12th spot. So a little bit tough on Everton, but, they finished 15th in the end. They survive. Brentford had a really tough end to the season, which is kind of surprising because Ivan Toney came back into this team after his 6-month ban, and they kind of fell further down. So Brentford finished in 16th in the end. Nottingham Forest, they survived in the end. They finished in 17th spot, and unfortunately, the 3 teams who got promoted last season are all going to be going back down. Luton Town finished in 18th, Burnley 19th, and then Sheffield United are all going down. Another thing I want to talk about as well is in the Bundesliga. Absolutely massive performance in the end from Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer never losing. I love that. Because they obviously called him Bayer Leverkusen. Loserkausen, I think it was. Because they never won never Kausen, I think. I can't even remember what it was. But anyway, they went with the invincible season. They did not lose a game the whole season, Bayer Leverkusen. Absolutely massive season from them. They finished up top by 17 points. How massive is that? And the funny thing is, Bayern Munich didn't even finish second. They finished in 3rd spot. So, why do the Bundesliga get 5 teams? I didn't even know that. But anyway, yeah, they finished Borussia. So the way the Bundesliga went was, I'll just read the couple of top ones. Bayer Leverkusen finished top on an invincible season. Stuttgart finished 2nd. Bayern Munich finished 3rd. Leipzig finished 4th. Borussia Dortmund finished 5th. So those 5 teams are going into the Champions League. Frankfurt are in 6th and they go into the Europa League. And then Hoffenheim finished 7th. They are going into the Conference League. Interesting one I do want to point out, though. If you ever see, I don't know if you guys follow soccer that much, but there's a YouTuber called DMac. He makes a lot of YouTube shorts and stuff. And he's talked about a team called Heidenheim. This team was in the 4th tier of German football a couple of years, 5 or 6 years ago, and they almost got a Europe spot this year after being promoted. They finished 8th in the end, so they nearly got there in the end, but unfortunately they just missed out. There was 2 teams who were relegated. It was Cologne and Darmstadt. I don't know how to speak. I don't know the German twang that you say in English, but anyway, those 2 teams have definitely been relegated, and in German football, they have a playoff between the team who finishes 16th and the team, I think, who finishes 3rd. So Bochum will play in that. And Union Berlin, by the way, who played... do they play Champions League? I don't know if they played Champions League this year, but anyway, they finished 15th. They nearly got relegated. That would have been pretty embarrassing. I'm not gonna lie. I guess we'll go through all the leagues, eh? So in the... they've got one more game to go, I believe, in the La Liga season. They do. But at this stage, the La Liga season... Real Madrid have already claimed the top spot. Barcelona will finish 2nd. Girona will finish 3rd. Atletico Madrid will finish 4th. So all the Champions League spots have been made there. I'll be interested to see because there is a rule that the same owner of a team can't have more than one club in the Champions League. So I'll be interested to see if Girona do get their spot in the Champions League. We'll have to wait for that one. Athletic Club and Real Sociedad are in the Europa League and Real Betis are in the Conference League. Relegated from the La Liga are... Cadiz, Granada, and Almeria. Did they even get a win in the end? Because I don't think they were a team that did not get a win to some point in the season. They didn't have any wins for a lot of the seasons through. I'm trying to... I don't even know if they're going to bring it up here, are they? They're not going to bring it up. Oh, hang on, I can rotate it. Let me just do that because I just want to see if they got a win because I think they did get at least one. Oh, they got two. Oh my god, they had an insane season, guys. Obviously, and then what's the final league we have to take a look at? Would have been the Serie A. Oh, Serie A. I've also got the Leju. What's the French one? I don't even know what they call it anymore. Anyway, in the Serie A, I think there's one more game to go. There is. But Inter Milan have absolutely trounced the league this season. They got 93 points. And then AC Milan finished in second. Bologna finished in third. That's an interesting finish for them. I think it's a good player an old player who used to... is it Thiago Motta? I don't know who's coach. No, he doesn't coach them. He's coaching Caligari, I think. But Bologna finished in third, so they've got a Champions League. Juventus finished in fourth. Atalanta are in fifth. Roma are in sixth, but Atalanta have two more games. Oh, there's actually a few more games in the Serie A, actually. Roma are in sixth currently, and Lazio are in seventh. So those are in the Europa League spots. And then Fiorentina, are in 8th spot in the Serie A. And then looking at it, the final league we'll take a look at is the Ligue, the French league. That's all done. So the French league's all done. PSG finished top. Shocker. Who would have known with all the money they have in that and being like the Farmers League. Monaco are in second. They finished there. That's a pretty good finish from them. Brest finished in third. So that's a team that no one really know about. They finished there. Lille finished in fourth, Nice finished in fifth, and then Lyon finished in sixth. I think they're pretty far down the ladder, Lyon, so it was a good finish from them to get back into that spot. So looking at it, I think Lille will have to play in a playoff game for the Champions League spot. So, Champions League qualification, so they've got to try and fight for that. But good, well done from them. So that's a pretty good performance. They one of the few teams that they usually like the rebuild teams, you would say. Like they bring these like academy players through and then... Yeah, that's kind of how they build their teams. But looking at it now, kind of the only few soccer things to take a look at for the at least the next couple of weeks. I think there's a couple more things to come. There's obviously the World Cup, not the World Cup, the Olympics as well. But the next thing is the Champions League final. Borussia Dortmund up against Liverpool. Real Madrid. Sorry, they play that on the 2nd of June. So that's a couple of weeks away. Gotta hope Dortmund win that, but I highly doubt it. And also in the championship as well, we still have the is it the second legs, I believe, still to go. I'm just gonna have a quick look. Yeah, so there is the second leg still to go of the championship to go. So in the first legs, Norwich and is that right? Yeah, so Norwich and Leeds United played in the first legs. Norwich v Leeds was 0-0, and in the West Brom Southampton game it was 0-0 as well. But in the second games, these are the semis. Southampton won 3-1 over West Brom, and Leeds won 4-0 over Norwich Forest. So that means in the playoff final, we have Southampton versus Leeds. So that will be on the 26th of May, so that's Sunday morning for us. Actually, that's Sunday. It's Sunday night, so it's Monday morning. Fucking annoying. I may have watched that, but Leeds and Southampton. Whoever wins that game, it's the richest game in football. Whoever wins that will be going back into the Premier League. We've already seen Ipswich and Leicester City go back into the Premier League going into the Premier League next season. So that will be. I'll call it. I'd like to see Southampton. I like Southampton, so I'd like to see them jump up. But I think Leeds will win it, unfortunately. But that's basically all we have for episode 64 of the Boundary Riders podcast, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you did watch this on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. As of recording this, I think we had 996 subscribers. So maybe waking up Wednesday morning in a couple of days, we will see 1,000 pop over. I really do appreciate the support, guys. It's so great. And when we hit 1,000, if you don't know, we can get monetized. That means we can monetize our videos and make some absolutely massive cash. I think you make like a cent per view, not even that. So, but I mean, it's just great to you getting paid for something you love doing. So I really do appreciate it, guys. And yeah, if you did enjoy this episode of the podcast, make sure to like and subscribe. If you are listening to this over on Spotify, make sure to chuck us a follow and leave us 5 stars. And do all that wonderful stuff. I don't know, leave a nice comment. I don't even know if you can leave comments on Spotify, but if you can, make sure to do so. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next week.